Hi everybody, I'm Philip Heitzen, and thanks so much for tuning in to this week's Art of Procurement podcast. And while I was at ProcureCon Indirect East a few weeks ago, I interviewed Dave Quillen. Dave is manager of procurement at Alliant Credit Union in Chicago. And I last interviewed Dave back in early 2017 when he was at the end of the first year of a procurement transformation program. So this conversation gave us an opportunity to get caught up on the progress of his team and his organization, how have they been going over the last 2 years, and hear about what he's discovered along the way. And as you will hear, there have been some twists and turns along the way. In that conversation, we cover topics such as how small procurement teams can build or access specific category expertise, why implementing all P2P modules at once, even in response to stakeholder demand, may not be the best approach, and Dave shares a key piece of management advice from a former colleague that has made all the difference on the Alliant Credit Union transformation journey. So I started the podcast with Dave by just asking him for an update on his procurement transformation journey since the last time that he appeared on the pod and that we had spoken a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, first, it's great to be back here.
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me back, and the last couple of years have not gone as we thought, because it's not a straight line, right? So we knew that it was going to be twists and turns and things like that. And one of our biggest challenges we had over the last couple of years is around our procurement system. Mm-hmm. So when we launched it, we were in the middle of that when I think we talked last, we were in the middle of the implementation. And so we launched it. And there were a lot of bugs in the system, unfortunately, and caused some where we thought everything was going to be wonderful and people would love it. We had to work through those bugs and spend a lot of time with the vendor and with our internal teams to make sure that all of those things could be worked out. But in the end, I mean, in the current state where we are now, we're in a really good flow with our procurement, not just our procurement tool, but our process as well. Yeah. So as I've said before, it's not about a tool or anything like that. It's really about our process. And our processes continue to evolve. Over the last couple of years, we've matured our third-party risk management practice, which has then moved into our risk group. We're now starting an IT asset management practice, which is going to fall under me because I have expertise in that area. So we have that. I still have a small team, myself and one strategic sourcing person, and then one IT asset management contractor that's reporting into me. And I'm hoping to grow the team over the next couple of years. But so we've come a long way in that now our process is ingrained in the business. We did all of that, and we have the structure the way it is now. But the process is ingrained in the business, so that they are now using us more, and they're coming to us instead of us always going to them. Yeah. And it took 3 years from us to start getting those meetings out there, starting to talk to people about this is why it's important. We want to put you to best and highest use, and this is what it's going to do for you. And so now that we're completed a 3-year journey, we're ready to take the next step, and I'm really excited about what the future holds. I know it won't be exactly as we plan it out, as the last 3 years weren't, but it's not a bad thing though. I mean, that's just the normal ways of growing a team, especially when you're starting from scratch. And I know you have some listeners out there that are in various stages of maturity, and for those that are in a starting something from scratch, or you're taking something over and need to evolve it, work on that process and work on the communication. When you do that, people will want to work with you, and it won't be everybody all at once, and it's not rainbows and unicorns.
But like one at a time, but you're kind of winning over the hearts and minds.
Exactly. And it is winning over the hearts and minds, and the more you do that, the more you'll get them coming to you, and then you can start to be more proactive, which is where we're kind of at that jumping off point now into the next
Like 3 years stage of your journey. There's a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. First of all, you made the term best and highest use. What does that mean to you and to your organization too?
Yeah, so that comes from an old boss that I had, and he said that best and highest use. We want to put people to best and highest use, and I've grabbed onto that, and I've told him I'm using that all over the place. So, Chuck Hatzis, if you listen, I'm using your term, and thank you for that. But what that means to me is that when procurement people do what procurement people do best by working with the vendors, negotiating the contracts, understanding what our stakeholders need, and then letting our stakeholders do what they do best, which is the technology, the marketing, the operations, whatever it is, let them do what they do best, and we as procurement will do what we do best. And that's when we get the really, really good deals, because we're not having the business worry about, I got to, talk to a vendor or cut this deal or negotiate this contract, and you get better terms and a better all-around deal by putting people to best and highest use. And they're happier because they don't have to do something that they don't want to do. Generally, people that want to do technology love doing technology.
Yeah, they don't want to do procurement.
Exactly. And the ones that I've met over my career definitely don't want to do procurement. And usually you got someone begrudgingly doing it. And then I come along and say, hey, let's put you to best and highest use. Don't worry about that anymore. Yeah. Let me worry about that. Take that off your plate, and that is usually really well received.
Right. I wanted to come back to some of the lessons learned as you did the tech implementation. You said that when you started to put in place a platform, there were some gremlins out there.
There were, yeah.
In terms of it doing what you wanted it to do and being probably rolled out as smoothly as you wanted. Now, this is a challenge that I hear so often for smaller procurement groups who are looking at what do we do for the first time with technology, because oftentimes there really hasn't been any technology that existed before. What are some of the, you don't need to go into the specifics or point fingers or anything like that. I'd just love to hear some lessons that you learned throughout that process that perhaps others that are in the same situation could learn from that journey.
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson learned is don't bite off everything all at once. And what we did is we launched every module we bought all at once, and we worked through it. But I've been asked this before by others, my boss being one of them, and he said, "What would you do? What's the lesson learned? What would you do different?" And I said, "We will implement module by module by module." And as I've talked to other people in the industry, that's generally what I've heard is really, really successful. So. If you're in that situation, I would say find the solution that you're gonna get, but don't worry about implementing everything all at once. Take it slow. I know everyone's gonna want everything all at once in your business, and your stakeholders are gonna say, why can't we have it all at once? And if you take your time and start with the most pressing module for you, and for some people that might be sourcing, for other people it might be contract management, P2P, whatever is most pressing for you, launch that first and then build on top of it. And there's lots of good stuff out there to choose from, and more they're putting tools under one code base. So if you know your process, and this is one where I keep coming back to it as I talk to other people, I know this was extremely successful for us, and it's a good lesson learned, and that is know your process before, and you'll choose the right tool, and you'll mitigate as many risks as you possibly can. So know your process, and then roll things out slowly are the two biggest lessons that I've learned.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We sometimes think technology is going to fix everything. And so you kind of use that as the silver bullet, as opposed to, like you said, actually knowing where you're going to use it, what's the purpose of it, how is it going to fit, so important, versus just kind of pulling it straight in. The other thing just to mention, you talked about the timing, and it's really interesting that you say that, because we often want to do things in a hurry.
Right.
And, you look at a transformation roadmap of being a 3 or a 5 year roadmap, and, there's lots of people in the business that think, why can't you do all this in 6 months? And so I see, when you're looking at technology implementations, there can be timescales of 3 years, 4 years, depending on the modules, depending on the complexity. That's not unusual, but it's oftentimes really hard to sell internally of, like, we're going to be doing implementations for the next 3 or 4 years. And so it's natural to want to try and do things quicker.
Right, and it depends. I mean, it depends on your internal complexity. Some businesses are simpler than others, and you just the other thing with this too is that it is not a one and done thing. Yeah, that's the other thing I've noticed over the last couple of years at Alliant is that. I'm continuing pressing the message that this is a process that will continue over time, and we need to continually look at it and make sure that it is a process that still works, change it where it doesn't and all that. But this isn't just a let's put in a procurement department, we're done in 3 years and life is good. Right, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. It's a process that continues over time. And then I mentioned IT asset management. I'm saying the same thing with that, is that this is a process that will continue over time. Yeah. So you have to have a long-term plan and vision for this, and you have to have the support at the executive level to make sure that they're in it for the long haul. Yeah. And
executive governance is really important.
Absolutely.
We often miss that. But to actually, those are the people who are paying the bills of procurement, essentially.
Right.
To have them involved in what procurement looks like and the connection into where the business is going. Because, over a 3-year transformation program, the business may need some very different things in year 3 than what they thought they needed 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
So you're actually we should never be building something with a fixed point in mind, because really what the business needs is going to change.
Right. And it is a journey. And it's not necessarily a journey without end, because at some point you'll optimize your team, you'll optimize the process.
Yeah, you kind of go into continuous improvement.
Exactly, and when you're there, you're still improving, you're still evaluating, you're still looking at the process, but because if you tell an executive this is a journey without end, they're going to say, well, that's not acceptable either, right? Yeah. So, but the end goal is the level of maturity you want to set for yourself, and then you're going to reassess at that time. You're going to say, where are we now? And that's what we've done with this last 3 years. I was telling my management is, okay, we've completed something. We built the team. The team is here. Now, what do we do next? We're not finished. We're not where we want to be, but we got the foundation built, and now we're ready to jump off and build the next thing of that. They'll build the walls and all of that. So
I'm going to come back at the end
to
tease the audience of what the next 3 years looks like, what the next 3-year plan looks like. Before I get there, I actually wanted to talk about some of the challenges but also opportunities of running a small team, because it's very different than running, obviously, a larger organization where, while everybody will always say they're resource constrained, it's a little bit different in an environment where you've got 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, than if you have a team of 3 or 4 and you're really trying to make as big an impact as you can and make that team go as far as possible. Right. So one of the things I wanted to talk about first of all was around category specialization. So, obviously in an ideal world, we would have a category expert at marketing and one for insurance and one for HR benefits, and the list goes on. Right. Small company, obviously, you can't really do that.
Yeah,
so how do you manage the fact that it's hard to have category specialization with the need to bring value to a stakeholder over and above, obviously, their own knowledge?
Yeah, and that is hard. That is a challenge. And I think someone will have some type of category specialization. So what I mean by that is you won't have specialization in every category. What I would suggest is look at your largest spend areas, and those are the categories you should look to specialize in. Mm-hmm. But that same person, if your top spend area is marketing or technology, it's not HR or insurance or legal or anything like that, but the person that knows marketing is also going to have to take care of the HR category and the legal category probably, and you're going to have to split that up however you want to with your team.
And they're going to have that expected, know that that's expected of them as well.
Absolutely. You have to know that, and you have to be able to explain that to the candidate too, and as part of the job, and say, primarily you're here for, technology or marketing or whatever it is, but you're also going to deal with these other categories. And those other categories, as a manager, you should not expect them to have any expertise in, and B, help them work with the business unit, because the business unit that they're not an expert in, the category they're not an expert in, they're going to be experts there. And they're the ones that can help us. So what we have to say is go in honestly, partner with them, and again, tell them how we want to take this off of their plate so that we can put them to best and highest use. And ask them questions. Be interested in what it is that they do. Everyone loves to talk about themselves. So to ask them questions about how have you been doing this before I got here? Because they've been doing it. You know,
you need to be a real active listener. So you need to take that in as well. So you're not asking them twice.
Right.
Take it in the first time, then you can translate that into some way that you can help them.
Absolutely. And the second thing that helps, not only doing that, partnering with folks, but also using third-party resources. So we've started doing that where we look at market intelligence. There's a lot of market intelligence resources out there. Look at that, and that you can go into a category you may not know a lot about with some intelligence to make yourself look credible, and
at least more informed than what you would be with not really knowing anything.
And when you go in informed to a category that someone else spends their entire career doing, they're going to want to work with you more. And that's what I found has been really successful, is I can go in and say, okay, I'll spend an hour, researching this category, finding out some things, especially if it's like for an RFP or something specific. You can go find out who are the major players and who are using, who are not using, and then ask questions. Why aren't we using that person? Or should we include this vendor in the RFP where you weren't thinking about them? And here's why I think that, because I've done some research and the market looks like this to me, and that's going to give you a lot of credibility to go into a category where you don't have the expertise, because we can't all have teams of 50 people. I'd love to have,
even in, a $10 billion revenue organization, you can't have an expert in everything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you still have some of the same challenges. Yes, you've got more people. You probably have more domain expertise than you do in a much smaller team, where you obviously do. But you're still not going to ever cover everything unless you are, Fortune 50 company.
Right. And you can afford to have that many people in there. But we're still going to drive value to every category, even the ones we're not experts in. So managing a small team, that is one challenge. You're also, as a manager, going to be doing a lot of the work, because you as a manager will have category expertise. I do. I'm the manager of my team, but I also have technology expertise. So
and you need to spread that so that you make sure that whoever you bring in doesn't have the same, because then you're not just kind of cloning your own experiences to go as far and as deep as possible across multiple categories.
Right, and I have to learn other categories as well that I'm not an expert in, and following that same model and saying, okay, help me help you, and so on.
How do you prioritize? Because with a small team, it's obviously really hard to you're going to have more things coming to you than you can deal with, and what's I think even harder about that is you're going to get a lot of things that are small stuff.
Right.
That there's a strategic benefit of doing it to build a relationship, but it's not like you have the luxury of being able to take on all this small stuff, because you still got the other things that you need to do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we have become kind of the victims of our own success by having a lot of that come at us, and not the higher value things. What I do is I take I'll teach you to fish method. I actually say that to people. I'll say, Dave, can you help me with this? Sure, I'm going to teach you how to fish. I'm going to teach you how to do that so that you can do it for yourself next time. So this is where automation comes in handy, in that. So for us at Alliant, with our procurement tool, almost anyone in the organization can create a requisition and get that spend approved, send that PO to a supplier. Do not have to involve my team. We have very specific rules about when you need to involve procurement, and we've done that specifically so that we don't have to spend our time with things that aren't going to add a lot of strategic value to the organization, because that's where we need to be spending our time. However, we will take the time to teach that person how to do it. So we have the job aids, and we have, ourselves that we can, if we're there and, can spend a few seconds, we'll do that. That also helps keep the business person engaged, but also says that we don't have to do everything for you.
It's like this self-guided or self-service model without necessarily the guided buying technology on the top of it, but you're just helping them to really to be as effective as they can, and you become a coach.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, around technology specifically, where procurement has negotiated the pricing contracts, I don't need to be involved in every time I'm buying, new laptops or new printers or whatever. The technology, person that is in charge of that is creating the requisition and going and getting that done. They still, it's still kind of like, quote, procurement, if you will, but they're not doing all the negotiating and all of that. So we're still putting people to best and highest use. But we don't have the luxury. I don't have 10 buyers on my team to go through and put all the requisitions through. So our business does have to do that, and they do. And the nice thing about where at Alliant is that we do have an engaged group of people that will go in and want to do that and do that right, because it helps them too. And the other cool thing with automation is that when they do that correctly, they get the numbers that they want from a budget standpoint, knowing how much they're spending. And that's where we'll add even more value, is now that we can do that. And that's what's come with, we've had a complete 12 months of our procurement tool being live, all of 2018. We get all this really cool data now, and now I'm able to act on it, which is so cool. And that's the strategic stuff we're able to add the value for. So
and they still see you as being an enabler, because you're helping them get while you're not getting in the way, you're helping them get the results that they want to get. On the smaller stuff, as opposed to just kind of washing your hands of it and saying, hey, you're on your own.
Exactly. And we don't ever want to just say, hey, you're on your own. We're always here to help. And that's what helps keeps the business engaged.
Now, I know before you joined Alliant, you've worked in bigger companies, and then you've come to a smaller organization, to build the function up. Do you see different skills needed if you're coming into a smaller team than if you were working in a larger one?
I think, I think so. And the people skills, I think, need to be there, because you still need to in a larger organization, you can get away with kind of saying, okay, the smaller things here, you do it, and kind of rinsing your hands of that, because you're not interacting with those folks all the time. At a smaller organization, you're interacting with the same people all the time, so you need to hone those skills. It's just like negotiating anything, right? You want to make sure that you're doing that, but you're doing it in a way that keeps them engaged, and creating that positive environment that they want. And not that you're not going to do that in a larger organization, because obviously you will, but it's more one-on-one interaction than you have in a larger organization. It has a
bigger impact on the results of your organization.
Absolutely. And when I've been in larger organizations, I'm talking, to higher level managers, whereas in a smaller organization, I'm talking to higher level managers, but I'm also talking to staff level people too. So you have to know how to engage with the appropriate level of person you're talking with, and so you need to be able to talk. I mean, I talk to everyone from the CEO all the way down. So you have to have the flexibility. You can't be rigid with anything.
Now, do you think that I think this from a general procurement perspective, but I'm interested if it's even more pronounced within a small team environment, where ultimately the technical procurement skills aren't as important as the relationship and the soft skills and the influence and the persuasion, because you're in such a kind of captive environment, if you will, and it's not necessarily all about best practice procurement, but getting a job done and being able to kind of be pragmatic in getting a job done.
Right, and you have to. I mean, you have to keep the business rolling. So you don't want to get so caught up in, well, this is the best way to do it, and you gotta be flexible enough to say, okay, let's get this done. How do we do it where we're still in policy and all that type of thing, but enable them to get that done. And the one thing I've learned too by going to conferences like ProcureCon and those types of things is that I talk to other people that have small teams, and we're all kind of in that same boat, and we all talk that same thing. And we hear from larger companies, but then we'll talk and say, well, sometimes you just got to get the job done.
Yeah.
And we do it you have to have the skill set to recognize that, and then also work through your process as best you can but still getting that done. So I'm not suggesting, taking shortcuts and all this, but if there's a, quote, best practice of procurement that, you may get if you're at an IBM or someplace like that, maybe don't worry about it so much, other than following the process and getting stuff done.
Now, talking about process, how structured do you really build a process? Because you can look at, I've seen organizations, larger organizations, been in them myself, where, you have a 250-page playbook that says, this is how you do every single step, this is every single model you use, et cetera, et cetera. You still need something because you need a framework around which to work, but you said there's a lot more flexibility. When you're building it, do you build for flexibility, or do you build to say, this is what good looks like, but in reality, maybe we're not going to be able to follow that every single time? How do you approach kind of that trade-off?
Yeah, we build with flexibility in mind. So part of our maturation process is that we now have governance in place at Alliant. So I have written policies, standards, and procedures, and we've built that with flexibility in mind. So here's what we want to do, and here's, there are some things where we have to do that. Contract review, I have to send it to legal.
Yep.
However, not everything that's signed has to go to legal.
Yeah.
Whereas in a larger company, it might be, I don't care if it's just an SOW or just an order form or whatever. If it's got a signature, you got to go to legal, and that'll take 12 weeks and all of this. Again, by getting the job done, what we've said is, if there's legal terms, it's got to go to legal. They got to do the legal terms and all that. If it's just business terms, then procurement will review, and the business unit will review procurement's red lines and all that, and then we'll go from there. It frees up legal, but again, putting them to best and highest use, because they're generally not going to do business terms.
And they've got the same constraints that you have in terms of resources as well. It's not like they have, an ivory tower of lawyers all over the place where they want to get involved in everything. They probably want to get involved in as little as they possibly can get away with, while obviously maintaining the integrity of the risk management. They don't want to see everything.
Absolutely. And so we've built with flexibility in mind to know that we have to be able to get business done and be flexible in the process. And POs is another good example. We know that we're not going to get a PO for absolutely everything, so we've exempted some things out and said for these types of things. Now, as we have further conversations, we say, well, those things we exempted out 3 years ago, are they still the right things to be exempted out? Yeah. And so you constantly got to iterate and look at what you're doing, but you have to be flexible as well.
Now, one of the things I wanted to touch on was, we obviously see a lot of industry coverage about emerging new technologies. Maybe it's old technologies that are being put to practice in new ways. We often forget about finding, or kind of focusing on what's important. And in a smaller organization, I'm imagining that your budgets to be able to do wonderful pilots and test lots of new things are kind of limited.
Right.
How do you find you are keeping one eye on doing things different and using technology while being pragmatic enough to realize that I'm not suddenly going to get a huge budget to bring in a new, all singing, all dancing technology solution. Maybe I'm only going to get one shot at this or two shots at it. And so I got to be really careful where I focus. How do you balance that off so that you're still keeping an eye on things, but you're recognizing that my future isn't going to be, all this wonderful technology and I can just take a seat back?
Right. I was actually having a conversation with some folks today about that very topic, and it goes back to the process, trying to get things done. So yes, you have to know what's out there. You have to know that there's RPA out there, robotic process automation. You have to know that there's all sorts of different technologies coming out, blockchain, all of that. You have to know what that is, but you also have to understand what works for your business. Yeah. RPA may work for some. It's going to work for the big companies. It may not make sense for you. But when you come to a conference and when you are hearing about those things, the way I kind of take it is cool. That's kind of cool to think about. Is there something that would apply here? Maybe yes, maybe no. But it doesn't stop the day-to-day. I got to get stuff done. So I'm not spending a whole lot of resources on, okay, I got to implement something in RPA because I've heard about that, at a conference somewhere. So we're going to go, do that because A, I don't have the budget to do it, and B, I don't have the resources to do it because I'm a small team. So I gotta make sure that when we look and see what the opportunity is, then knowing what is out there, you may be able to bring some things in and make life easier for everybody.
So you want to know about it, but it's not necessarily you have the opportunity to deep dive because you just.
Right.
I don't want to say blocking and tackling per se, because I think you're doing a lot more because you're proactively creating value for folks.
Absolutely.
But in doing that, then that allows you to iterate, grow slowly over time, and then maybe there's an opportunity to start investing in or experimenting with some of this technology that you've been keeping an eye on, but perhaps before you couldn't utilize.
Yeah, and small teams probably won't be on the bleeding edge, and that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that to be disparaging. I think that because of all the stuff we have to do, we're not gonna be able to do that.
Yeah.
And if you like to be on the bleeding edge, and that's why the big companies are what they are, and they got a lot of really cool things going on. But as leading a small team, you just have to know what it is and look for that opportunity, because if you can make your process more efficient as you mature and all of that, then it's going to make life easier on your team, because some teams can get overwhelmed really fast.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you have to recognize that and say, okay, is there a way to make this better? Oh, I heard about RPA and someone said it could be used for procurement for like a PO process. Can that work?
Yeah.
It's been out for a while. Can that work here? And maybe it can, maybe it can't, or maybe you're not ready for it yet. Just recognize where you are in your maturation stage.
So one last question I just have on the journey. As you are, how do you make a procurement role attractive, in a small team to an external candidate who, you yourself, you came from big companies. There was obviously a reason that motivated you to come into a smaller organization. How are you attracting people who have, are very well versed, they're mature, they can have a big impact, so the good procurement professionals, how are you attracting them into a small company environment?
So one of the things that attracted me to the role was that I can take the expertise that I've had over the years and build the procurement organization of my dreams.
Yeah.
And I've been able to do that. Now, to bring other talent in, I kind of look at it in two ways. One, I don't necessarily need the most experienced procurement people. I can train someone who's new to it. What I find is that salespeople that are pretty good at sales also make really good procurement people. I being one of them.
We're closer than we like to, I think, admit sometimes.
We are. We're reverse sales.
Yep.
I'm a reformed salesperson. I've come over and seen the light. But I think that those folks make good procurement folks. And what I tell them is, if I can train you to do this, and you're going to make a big impact really fast.
Yeah.
And they will. In a small company, you have visibility up through all levels of management, no matter where, especially in procurement, because you're seeing everything that's happening. So that's the other thing that I try to talk to people about is that this is high visibility.
Yeah, the comfort level in basically speaking to executives every day.
Absolutely, and we do that, and so it's really really cool to tell someone that, hey, you can come in here, you can make a really big impact really fast, and you're going to talk to the CEO within really soon. Obviously can't guarantee when, but
there's no place to hide.
There's no place to hide, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I do that, and so I think that's really cool. And part of it is too, we can be a jumping off point for people's careers.
Yeah.
We can, train someone, they will then go on to a larger company if that's what they want to do. Some people will want to really like being at the small company and like having that big impact all the time, and that's really great. So just because you're a small team doesn't mean you can't attract great talent. You just have to look in the right places for the right talent that's going to fit your organization, and that's what I try to do, is find that right talent for me. Yes, I'll look at some categories if I'm looking for someone to cover marketing mainly, then I'll look for someone with that skill set and then explain to them why this is a really good thing, which is it is a small team, but it's a high impact thing, and it's something that you can also make your own. Every procurement person is different, and they can make it what they want it to be. We'll have some guidelines and frameworks and all of that, but there's no rigidity, if that's even a word.
Yeah, and I know what you mean. It's like,
right.
You have the power in your own choices to make the job what you want it to be.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really cool opportunity that you can't necessarily get at a large
where you just
organization.
plugged into what you're a cog in a bigger wheel.
Right.
So we talked earlier about what the first 3 years looked like, building the foundations, getting the building blocks in place. So how are you starting to think about the next 3 years and creating value in new ways?
Yeah, so the first 3 years, I mean, they're not easy, but that's where you're getting all the low-hanging fruit, and it's really easy to see value quickly.
Yeah, everyone's cheering your savings numbers because you're touching things for the first time. And
absolutely. And now the hard part begins, and what we're looking at for the next 3 years is how do we become that strategic sourcing organization. So we've done the reactive procurement, traditional procurement stuff. Now we need to be proactive, and we really need to become a strategic sourcing organization as much as we can given our size. So the next 3 years looks like a transition, mature, and optimize. So this year we're going to transition to that strategic sourcing activities, mature those activities in 2020, and then by 2021 optimize that team, move into that continuous improvement. And as I think about it, I think that by that point I will have the right team for my organization in place. 6 years later from the time that it started, I'm going to have the right team that I can start making things better and better and better. And everything kind of goes in 3 year cycles. So after that, what's the next 3 years going to look like from there? I don't know yet.
Who knows what technology will be out there to help assist you on your journey, or what the company needs. Lots of unknowns.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
well, Dave, I want to thank you so much for sharing the continuation of your journey. We'll have to check back in with you in a couple of years' time again, see how the next phase is going. But I just want to thank you for your time.
Yes.
If listeners would like to connect with you directly, where would be a good place for them to find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Dave Quillen, all one word. That's the best place to connect with me on social media. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. Search for Dave Quillen, and I'm there as well. So, but Philip, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
No, you're welcome. And what I'll do is I'll just include those links on our show notes page. So if folks want to go to artofprocurement.com/podcast, they'll be able to search for you. They'll find the links to your LinkedIn profile and to Twitter.
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Cheers, you too.
Thanks.
Bye. Hi there. I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.